Lianxiang is a story from the collection of classical Chinese short stories, Strange Stories, from a Chinese studio written by the Qing Dynasty novelist Pu Songling. It tells the love story between the fox spirit Lianxiang, the ghost woman Li Shi, and the scholar Sang Ziming. In the city of Yizhou, there was a scholar named Sang Ziming, who lived alone in the Red Flower Village after losing his father at a young age. Sang was quiet and reserved, and he didn't socialize much. Other than going to the neighboring town for 2 meals a day, he spent most of his time in his residence. A fellow scholar from the neighboring town joked with him, "Aren't you afraid of foxes and ghosts living alone here?" Sang smiled and replied, "A real man shouldn't fear foxes or ghosts. If a male fox comes, I have my sword. If a female fox comes, I'll even open the door to let her in." After the neighboring scholar returned home, he and his friends planned something and in the evening, used a ladder to sneak a prostitute into Sang's yard. The prostitute knocked on Sang's door, and when he asked who it was, she claimed to be a ghost. Sang became extremely frightened, and his teeth chattered. The prostitute lingered outside the door for a while before leaving. The next morning, the neighboring scholar visited Sang's study. Sang recounted his encounter with the ghostly figure during the night and expressed his intention to go back home. The neighboring scholar burst into laughter and mocked him. "Why didn't you let her in?" Sang suddenly understood that it was a hoax, and he decided to stay without worry. After half a year, another woman knocked on Sang's door at night. Assuming it was a friend playing a joke, Sang opened the door to find a stunningly beautiful woman. The woman introduced herself as Lianxiang, a courtesan from the neighboring western town. Given the numerous brothels in the area, Sang had no reason to doubt her story. They spent the night together, and from then on, Lianxiang visited every few nights. One evening, Sang sat alone in his study, lost in thought under the lamplight, when a young girl gently pushed the door open. Thinking it was Lianxiang, Sang stood up to greet her. However, he didn't recognize this young girl. She was around 15 or 16 years old, her hair still down, and she looked ethereal and beautiful. The girl introduced herself as Li, a virtuous young woman who admired Sang's elegance and wished to be close to him. Sang was taken aback, but the girl's beauty captivated him. They became intimate that night. After their encounter, the girl got dressed and left. From then on, she visited every few nights. One night, Lianxiang came to Sang's room and noticed his pale appearance. Concerned, she asked why he looked so unwell. Sang dismissed it, but Lianxiang left, promising to meet again in 10 days. After she left, Li visited Sang every night without interruption. She asked Sang about his relationship with Lianxiang, who hadn't come for a while. Sang told her about their arrangement. Li asked if she was as beautiful as Lianxiang. Sang replied that both women were exceptional, but Lianxiang's skin felt warmer. Upset by his response, Li insinuated that Lianxiang was likely a celestial being from the Moon Palace. Sang, suspecting jealousy, didn't pay much attention to her words. After a while, Sang's health started deteriorating. He became weak and frail, and his condition worsened day by day. At first, he attributed it to a minor illness, but soon he became emaciated and could only drink porridge for sustenance. He considered returning home to recover, but his attachment to Li prevented him from leaving. After a few more days, he was bedridden and couldn't get up anymore. A neighbor began sending food and water daily to his door. It was at this point that Sang started suspecting Li's involvement in his illness. He regretted not listening to Lianxiang's warning. He finally lost consciousness, and when he woke up, Li was gone. Sang was left alone in his empty room, longing for Lianxiang's presence. One day, while thinking of her, she suddenly appeared before him. She taunted him, saying, "Didn't I tell you the truth?" Sang burst into tears and confessed his mistake, begging her to save him. Lianxiang explained that his illness was beyond cure and that she had come to bid him farewell, to prove that her actions weren't born out of jealousy. Sang begged her to destroy an item he had hidden beneath his pillow, a pair of embroidered shoes. Lianxiang found the shoes and examined them closely. Suddenly, Li entered the room, saw Lianxiang and attempted to leave. Lianxiang blocked her way. Sang accused Li and expressed his disappointment. Lianxiang pointedly questioned Li about Sang's illness and whether she had caused it. Li bowed her head in apology. Lianxiang remarked on the irony that such a beautiful woman would become enemies over love. Li cried and asked Lianxiang to save Sang. From that point on, Lianxiang continued to visit Sang, trying to treat his condition. However, his health had deteriorated beyond repair. Lianxiang informed Sang that she had to leave, and despite his pleas, she couldn't save him. Sang was left alone, waiting for Lianxiang, who promised to return after 100 days to see him on his deathbed. Lotus Fragrance helped Lian to her feet and inquired about her life in detail. Lian said, "I am the daughter of Magistrate Li. I lost my life at a young age and was buried outside the courtyard. I am like a silkworm that died in spring, its silken threads not yet broken. I formed a bond with the young man Sang Lang, and it's my heartfelt wish. I didn't intend to cause his death. It wasn't my true intention." Lotus Fragrance remarked, "I've heard that ghosts wish to lead people to their deaths so they can stay together in the afterlife. Is that true?" Lian replied, "No, two ghosts being together isn't enjoyable. If there's pleasure, aren't there plenty of young men in the underworld?" Lotus Fragrance continued, "Silly. Engaging in nightly pleasures, even humans can't endure that, let alone ghosts." Lian also asked, "I heard fox spirits can captivate and lead people to their deaths. Do you possess any magic to avoid such an outcome?" Lotus Fragrance responded, "You're referring to foxes that feed on human essence. I'm not that type. There are foxes in this world that don't harm people, but there are no ghosts that don't harm. It's because ghosts are filled with too much yin energy." Sang Shang, overhearing their conversation, learned that both ghosts and fox spirits were indeed real. Thankfully, having spent time with them, he didn't feel frightened. However, the thought of his own impending death made him burst into tears. Lian asked Lotus Fragrance, "Is there a way to save Sang Lang?" Blushing, Lian shook her head, feeling helpless. Lotus Fragrance chuckled and said, "I'm afraid that once Sang Lang recovers his health, Madame Vinegar will be jealous of the attention he gets again." Lian humbly bowed and said, "If a skilled doctor can save Sang Lang and absolve me of wrongdoing, I will live honestly in the underworld. I wouldn't dare to return to the human realm." Lotus Fragrance opened a medicine pouch and took out a pill, saying, "I knew this day would come. After our separation, I traveled to the 3 mountains and 5 peaks, collecting herbs. It took over 3 months to prepare this remedy. No one who uses it after being overworked to death fails to recover. However, we need someone to bring the cause of the illness to light and provide the trigger for the medicine. That's why I must ask for your full assistance." Lian asked, "What do you need?" Lotus Fragrance replied, "Just a bit of saliva from the cherry blossoms on your lips. I'll place a pill in his mouth, and I need you to transfer it using your saliva." Lian blushed, embarrassed, and looked down at her embroidered shoes in distress. Lotus Fragrance teased, "Your proudest skill is embroidery." Lian blushed even more, feeling utterly embarrassed. Lotus Fragrance continued, "Isn't this the skill you're most adept at? Why so hesitant today?" After saying this, she placed the pill in Sang Shang's mouth and turned to urge Lian. Reluctantly, Lian had to transfer the pill using her saliva. Lotus Fragrance instructed, "Spit again." Lian spat a few more times, and only after 3 or 4 attempts did the pill go down. Soon after, Sang Shang's stomach began rumbling like thunder. After giving him another pill, Lotus Fragrance administered breath into him herself. Sang Shang felt warmth in his lower abdomen and newfound vitality. Lotus Fragrance stated, "The illness is cured." At that moment, the rooster heralded dawn, and Lian left hesitatingly. In the initial stages of Sang Sheng's recovery, Lotus Fragrance decided he needed proper care, especially since his eating and drinking weren't settled. She locked the courtyard gate to create the illusion that Sang Sheng had returned home, effectively cutting off outside interaction. She personally nursed him day and night. Lian also came every night, serving him attentively like an elder sister. Lotus Fragrance cherished her too, and after 3 months, Sang Sheng had fully regained his health. After that, Lian didn't visit for several nights in a row. When she did visit, it was only for a short while, and she seemed melancholic during their conversations. Lotus Fragrance had often urged her to share a bed with Sang Sheng, but she had consistently refused. One time, Sang Sheng managed to catch her and carried her back. He found her as light as a paper doll. Unable to leave, Lian lay down, still wearing her clothes, her body curled up to less than 2 feet long. Despite Sang Sheng's efforts to awaken her, she remained unresponsive. He eventually had to lie down beside her. When he woke up to look for her, she was gone again. In the following days, Lian didn't return for more than 10 nights. Sang Sheng missed her deeply and often took out her embroidered shoes to play with Lotus Fragrance. Lotus Fragrance said, "Such a beautiful woman. I also really like her, not to mention you man." Sang Sheng replied, "Before, whenever I touched the embroidered shoes, she would appear immediately. It makes me doubt myself, but I never thought she was a ghost. Now, thinking of the shoes only makes me sad." As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes. Before this, there was a wealthy man named Jiang who had a daughter named Yener. When she was 15, she died. After a night, she revived, got up, and tried to run outside. Jiang quickly closed the door to prevent her from leaving. She explained, "I am the spirit of Magistrate Li's daughter. I'm grateful for Sang Lang's care. I left a pair of embroidered shoes for him. I really am a ghost. There's no benefit in keeping me locked up." Jiang found her words somewhat reasonable and asked her how she ended up here. Yener looked down and couldn't explain herself clearly. Someone nearby mentioned that Sang Sheng had returned home ill. Yener insisted he hadn't, but her family was deeply suspicious. A neighboring scholar heard about this and secretly observed Sang Sheng's residence from the wall. He saw Sang Sheng conversing with a beautiful woman and burst in suddenly, but the woman had vanished in an instant. The scholar was perplexed and repeatedly questioned Sang Sheng. He replied, "I told you before, if a woman comes, I'll keep her." The scholar recounted Yener's words to Sang Sheng. Sang Sheng immediately unlocked the door and went to inquire. However, he realized he had no reason to go and was filled with anguish. Jiang's mother heard that Sang Sheng hadn't returned home, which became even more perplexing. She sent a maid to Sang Sheng's place to ask for the embroidered shoes. Sang Sheng handed them over. Yener was delighted to see the embroidered shoes, quickly tried them on, but they were an inch too small. She was shocked, and upon looking in a mirror, she dimly understood she had taken over another person's body. She explained the events that transpired, and Jiang's mother finally believed her. Yener wept in front of the mirror, saying, "I was confident in my appearance, but whenever I saw Sister Lotus Fragrance, I felt inferior. Now I've become like this. Being a ghost is better than being a person." She cried while holding the embroidered shoes, and no one could console her. After crying, she lay down under the blanket, refusing to eat. Soon, her whole body swelled up, but after 7 days without food, she still didn't die. The swelling gradually subsided. Later, she couldn't bear the hunger and started to eat. After a few days, her body became itchy, and she shed a layer of skin. When she woke up one morning, her sleeping shoes fell off. When she picked them up and tried them on again, they were too big. Trying on her old embroidered shoes, they fit perfectly. She was overjoyed and, looking in the mirror, saw that her features were the same as before. After dressing herself up, she went to see her mother. When her family saw her, they were amazed and stared at her in astonishment. Upon learning this strange story, Lotus Fragrance advised Sang Sheng to propose to the Jiang family. However, considering the difference in their social status, Sang Sheng didn't dare to propose rashly. Soon, it was Jiang's mother's birthday, and Sang Sheng accompanied Jiang's family to offer birthday wishes. Seeing Sang Sheng's name on the guest list, Jiang's mother had Yanner hide behind a curtain to secretly observe. Yanner rushed up when Sang Sheng arrived, grabbing his sleeve and wanting to go back home with him. Jiang's mother scolded her, and Yanner blushed and returned to the room in embarrassment. Sang Sheng carefully observed Yanner and saw her striking resemblance to Lian. He asked, "How old are you?" She replied, 14. He inquired further, "How much is the betrothal gift?" The old woman answered, "I'm an old widow with only this daughter. I hope to find her a good family. I'll have a place to eat, and my old bones won't be left in the wild mountains and valleys, so that's enough for me." Sang Sheng paid more silver and bought the girl. Holding the girl's hand, Yanner came into the room and lifted her chin, smiling as she asked, "Do you recognize me?" The girl replied, "I don't." She was asked about her background, and she said, "My surname is Wei. My father sold wine in Zucking, but he passed away 3 years ago." Yanner calculated on her fingers it had been exactly 14 years since Lian's death. After closely observing the girl's appearance and demeanor, she bore a striking resemblance to Lian. Yanner patted the girl's head and called out loudly, "Sister Lotus! Sister Lotus! You really kept your promise to meet me again in 10 years." The girl looked at her as if awakening from a dream, exclaiming, "Oh," and staring at Yanner closely. Sang Sheng, seeing this, laughed and said, "It's indeed familiar faces, the swallows return." The girl wiped her tears and said, "It's true. My mother said I could speak from birth. People thought it was an ill omen, so they made me drink dog's blood, causing me to forget my past life. I've only just awakened from that dream today." "Madam, are you that Sister Li who didn't want to be a ghost?" The three of them reminisced about their past lives, overcome with emotions. On the cold food festival, Yanner said, "Today is the day Sang Lang and I weep for Sister Lotus every year." She and the girl went to Lotus Fragrance's grave, where wild grasses had grown, and the trees had grown tall. The girl sighed, moved by the scene. Yanner told Sang Sheng, "Sister Lotus and I were friends into lifetimes. I can't bear the separation. We should bury our remains together." Sang Sheng agreed and exhumed Lian's grave, taking out her bones and bringing them back to be buried alongside Lotus Fragrance. When friends and family heard about this strange occurrence, they dressed in festive attire and gathered for the funeral, totaling several hundred people. In the year Jiangzu, while traveling in the south, I arrived in Yizhu. Stuck in the rain and unable to leave, I stayed at an inn. A person named Liaozhai, a distant cousin of Sang Sheng's family, showed me a biography of Sang Sheng, written by Wang Zizhang, which contained about 10,000 characters. I had the chance to examine it in detail. The above is only a rough outline of the story. The historian Yuan Shi said, "Oh, the dead want to live, and the living want to die. Isn't the most precious thing in the world this body? Unfortunately, those who possess it often treat it carelessly. It's not even as good as the fox Lotus Fragrance, who died quietly and became a fox, or the ghostly N.